Dr. Jazz.
I'll just jump in.
Jazz.
Obviously, I'll start our talk with the new record, "Being Human," and I just listened to it today again, and it's such a burning record. I love your composing for years already, since those records with the '90s with Drew Grass and Patitucci and those guys. And what's the story behind the album? I mean, I've kind of read the liner notes, but still, it's the tunes are really beautiful. Starts with this powerful passion tune, and what's the story behind the project?
First of all, thank you so much, and thanks for listening to it. The story behind the album is that I wanted to send a message of unity, and I started to think about what qualities we all have in common as human beings. There's so much division in our world. We're kind of torn apart, and I wanted to focus on those qualities that really define our essence and our humanity. Qualities such as passion and courage and love and curiosity, and many others as well. I also dedicated some of the compositions to specific individuals who, to me, exemplify those qualities.
Mm. Yeah. How do you write usually? Like, I mean, you've been such a prolific composer, I think, since the mid '90s. What's your process, especially for this record? I always, when I listen to your tunes, there's such beautiful melodies always. Like, what's your process there?
Thank you. Well, sometimes as a composer, I can be lucky, and a melody will just kind of pop into my head, and then I immediately write it down, because if I don't, I'm in big trouble because
Yeah.
it'll be gone forever. I remember a few years ago, I was about to fall asleep and I heard a really beautiful melody, and I thought, okay, I'm really tired. I'm definitely going to remember this tomorrow. And I even made a whole list in my head of, how I could remember it. Gone
Yeah,
forever.
I know those.
So
Yeah.
I write things down. Yeah. And, I write down the melody line, and I have a staff music manuscript paper, and I divide it with 4 lines each for each melody, so that
Hmm.
I can write different variations of the same thing, because I never know what's going to work. And if I just do revisions, then I have to go back and say, oh, I liked bar 2 in that version like 2 weeks ago. This way I can see, oh, bar 1 I like a lot. Bar 2, oh, I'm not sure I like that. I like this different version. And I just write down, and sometimes, most of the time I'm at the piano, and sometimes I sing the melodies, or I speak the rhythms to see if they
Hmm.
make sense rhythmically. And so it doesn't just seem like a stream of notes. I think it's really important to first have a really strong melodic idea.
Yeah.
If we don't have that, it's hard to capture the audience's attention, I think. And that could be some kind of a motive that draws people in. And after that, there's a lot of craft involved, meaning we have to, try different things and use our musical knowledge of possibilities. I'm kind of an intuitive composer,
Hmm.
and that can have its pluses, its good side, and also it can be problematic, because I can easily write the same tune a couple times and not know I've done it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But yeah, luckily I'll usually catch it and think, oh no, this is too much like the other tune. But I don't sit and analyze it harmonically. I might take a look and say, oh yeah, this root movement is the same, and I can't. They can't both be on the same record. I remember years ago hearing a story about Stevie Wonder writing a tune a day,
Yeah.
and I thought, remarkable. Now, as we know, he's recorded a lot of music, but he hasn't recorded, you know, 365 times, however long he's been doing this. So that means that there are a lot of songs that he didn't record. And maybe that's part of the process of just making sure you keep writing.
Yeah.
And that happened with this project. I was writing a lot of tunes and I didn't like any of them. And I remember thinking, these are all really mediocre. And I wonder if they're going to get better. Now, none of them are on the record because that was apparently me warming up. So that's kind of how I compose, and an idea, an answer, another idea. Do you answer the first idea with a variation of the first idea or a totally contrasting phrase? I mean, there's so many different possibilities. And
Yeah.
I also know that it takes time. It takes me like a year or more to write the music for an album, and then even more time to learn how to play the music.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a good question of composing, what you mentioned before, like, because I many times ask myself that, I come up with a 7/4 vamp and I write a melody over and I'm like, okay, I've done that like 15 years ago. Is it valid still? And then I read interviews with I don't know, or listen to Wayne Shorter, who's, he has kind of the similar chord progression in many tunes, or Coltrane or All the Giants. And then I'm always like puzzled with this, should you keep the tune or not? Or so yeah, it's a heavy question always. I don't know.
It really is a heavy question, and I think um, ultimately we listen to a composition and we think, how does this feel?
Yeah.
If I were sitting in the audience, how would I feel listening to this? And that's the only reference point I have. Like, does this make me feel good? Do I feel some kind of, am I drawn to this music by the melody? And for me, melody has always been a really important thing because people hear melodies before they hear harmonic progressions.
Well,
When you
absolutely.
think of like the melody of Danny Boy or Somewhere Over the Rainbow, or you know, even without any harmony, they're very strong, these melodies. And there's
Yeah.
something about that I've been exploring for many years.
Hmm. Where does this come from for you, like composition wise? Who were the players
I'm
that influenced you as a composer? I mean, when you were, when did you have the jazz moment actually, like for you, that you said like, shit, I wanna play this music?
I was 25 years old and I was walking down the street in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was finishing up a master's degree in classical music.
Ah,
And
okay.
I heard a thought, and the thought was, you should study jazz. Not I should study jazz, but you should. So who knows? And I decided that I would take some lessons at the conservatory where I was studying with Rebecca Pennies, who is a renowned concert pianist. And I sat down at the piano with Tony King, who taught me for a few times, and he put Round Midnight in front of me, and he said, "Read that, and then make up new melodies over the chord changes." And I
Hmm.
said, "Are you kidding? I get to do that?" And I said, "Is that jazz?" And he said, "Well, that's a good start. That varying the melody and making up new melodies." And at that point, it just blew my mind, and I knew that I had to explore this music and learn as much as I could and listen as much as I could to the masters. And then I started studying with someone else, and he had me transcribe Bud Powell and Charlie
Hmm.
Parker and Thelonious Monk and Bill Evans, McCoy, Tyner, and many other people to
Hmm.
get inside this music, which is such a remarkable art form.
Wow, interesting. So you were quite late with jazz then, basically with 25. I mean, did you listen to jazz before while you were studying classical as well, or not really?
No,
Oh, wow.
the only
Okay.
jazz I heard was a Dave Brubeck recording with Paul Desmond, and I was living with a guy in college, and I remember him having that on, and I heard Take Five and a couple other selections, and I didn't know anything about what the format was. I didn't understand, and I remember thinking, oh, they're playing this melody, and now they're playing other melodies. I don't think I even knew that they were soloing over the same chord changes. And so I didn't really know what jazz was. I didn't know how to listen to jazz. It felt like, a little bit of a traffic jam to me when I when I listened to jazz. I didn't know where I should focus my attention. And the beauty of jazz is we can listen to the entire group, but we can also focus in on the piano,
Hmm.
focus in on the bass, drums, and we'll have a kind of a magnified view of all the nuances that are occurring in real time in this improvised music.
Yeah, yeah. Was it easy for you a transition? Because I remember I worked quite some with classical musicians, like with chamber orchestras, and I remember the first time I wrote like a suite, and there was a free part in between. And for jazz musicians, it's kind of, here we improvise. And the classical guys were like, what? Technically, of course, they were monsters. They were, the viola players and the violin, they could do anything. But when I said improvise, that was like the mindset was completely different. Was it heavy for you to make the switch? I mean, to learn to improvise, or?
Yeah, it's heavy. It is heavy. Yeah, it's it's a different world. One does not translate into the other because in classical music we are reading music and internalizing it and bringing it to life from the page, from the written page. And in jazz, we are learning compositions, but we're learning how to improvise in real time and to make up basically a new composition. So I could improvise a little when I started because as a young child I played by ear,
Mm.
and we had a toy plastic piano when I grew up, and I would play songs that I'd heard off the radio, like Moon River. I remember learning that song, and it's funny, I've never recorded it, but I learned that many years ago, and I would make up melodies, but there wasn't anybody to study with, and I didn't know anything about jazz.
Mm.
I asked my parents if I could study when I was like really young, like before morning kindergarten, so that was like age 3 or 4 or something like that. And the local piano teacher said, no, she's way too young. And I kept asking. And my natural instincts were to play by ear rather than play by reading. So much so that she would play the songs for me, and then the next week I would play them back. And she realized that I was not learning how to read.
Mm.
And so she said, I'm not going to play these for you anymore. You have to figure out the notes. And I was not a good student. I was very resistant, and I didn't practice very much. And it, might have been a whole different scenario if I had connected with someone who had exposure to jazz.
Yeah.
And I remember asking, even when I was 16 and 17, there was a little bit of a curiosity. I think I might have, no, I'm a little bit later, sorry, in college when I had heard, a little bit of jazz, of wanting to figure out what this is. Because it's just so mysterious in a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm blown away that there are people that actually learn it without studying, because there are self-taught jazz musicians who've never taken a lesson with anyone. But I think
Mm.
that's the rarity.
Yeah. 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 You need a system. I didn't study jazz. I still play jazz, but I had teachers. But you have to be really self-organized to, make your schedule like, okay, 1 hour of transcribing, 1 hour of listening, 1 hour of technical. So yeah, it's a dedication, but it's so rewarding, I think. I don't know.
It
In
is.
the end.
But you also need somebody to tell you, don't
Yeah.
play that, don't play that now. Or that voicing is not the right voicing.
Yes.
Teachers are, incredible,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm very fortunate to study with many great teachers.
Yeah. That's yeah. Like the advice of the players, actually, that's the most important. It's many times on stage, I remember like I got my ass kicked when I was really young, like yikes. But you keep on
Yeah,
pushing, obviously, so it's great. But
step at a
yeah, I wanted to ask you, I mentioned those mid-90s records, and they have eyes, and when you listen, and the eyes have it. And I really love those records. And how did you become a band leader? What's the story behind there? And uh, especially your connection
I
with
became a band leader.
so many bass players. Sorry.
When I was in Milwaukee, I started working pretty quickly after I was started studying. And I was lucky to be able to play with musicians who were much more advanced than I was, but I had to lead the group. And
Mm.
so it was trial and error. You have to get the repertoire together. You got to get some gigs. You've got to count off the tempos. You have to decide the what the feel of the tune is going to be. How are you going to program a set? Getting everybody organized. And I just kept learning by doing it and making lots of mistakes.
Right.
And when I moved to New York, after a few years of studying jazz, I decided to move to New York, and I went door to door to the different clubs who had like hundreds of tapes that musicians had dropped off, and I had to find a way to start working. And I was very lucky in the beginning. I started working at a place where I could hire whichever bassists and drummers I wanted to,
Okay.
and I was lucky to play with Rufus Reed and Jamil Nasser and
Mm.
Frank Gant on drums and Elliot Zygmunt and many different people over the years. And I had to somehow explain the tunes without having a rehearsal very quickly before we went on stage or we went up to play. And that was challenging in and of itself, to somehow make the group sound cohesive without having a rehearsal.
Mm.
And then, as the years went by, I put a group together and started rehearsing with the group. And I spent many, many hours a day on the phone, like 8 or 9 hours a day in the office, calling different clubs throughout the US. I didn't think it would be a good idea to wait for the phone to ring,
Oh, sure.
because maybe it would never ring.
Sure.
It could never ring. And so that's how I started becoming a leader. And I think the first trip to Europe, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 1994 or something like that. And I remember someone in my group saying, well, we're not making very much money going over here. I think we should wait. I said, wait for what? How do you think we're going to grow an audience in Europe by sitting here? And we went and we learned.
How was the first tour like for you in Europe?
Well, actually, I think one of the first tours I went on was to Japan with a group called 100 Golden Fingers, and the members of the group said it's not going to be like this forever. This is a rare tour. This is a tour with Hank Jones, Tommy Flanagan, Cedar Walton, Monty Alexander, Kenny Barron, Roger Calloway, Junior Mance. I know I'm forgetting someone, and Alan Dawson and Bob Cranshaw.
Oh man, how was that like?
It was amazing. We played
Christ.
duo piano and trio piano. I think I played a trio piano, a couple tunes with Kenny Barron, and it might have been Harold Mayburn. I know I did duo with Harold Mayburn, which was wild, and then trio compositions as well. And one of the things I learned was that every pianist has a unique touch and a unique sound. And as pianists, we hardly ever have the opportunity to be listening to the same piano played by 9 different pianists, or 10, including myself. And they were all different. I mean, Cedar Walton sounded different than Kenny Barron, who sounded different than Tommy Flanagan. Everybody has their own touch, and they created a particular sound in the piano. And that in and of itself was a remarkable experience. Oh, and Ray Bryant, I forgot about Ray. And they were just so gracious and supportive, and I was terrified the whole time.
How did you end up?
But after that, I did tours in Europe, and
how did you end up in that project, by the way?
I got called. Marion McPartland was supposed to do it. And okay. Jamil Nasser, it might have been Jamil or Harold Mayburn, when they heard that Marion couldn't do it, they knew me. And they recommended me to go on tour. And I got a call, and they said, can you go to Japan next week? And I didn't know what to do. I was just floored. I just went into high anxiety. And but it was a great experience.
Oh, yeah. It's like the players you mentioned, it's like monster composers and piano players. I mean, it's like, wow. Yeah, scary.
Yeah,
actually.
They're remarkable.
Yeah, wow. But then you could, was it easier in the 90s? Like, I mean, nowadays, in a sense, we have emails and everything. Like, was it easier to make tours and gigs in New York or touring in Europe for you? Like, or not really?
Easier. I think there was a point it was easier, but now the promoters are inundated with hundreds of emails, probably every day, of people wanting to play at venues.
Yeah.
And it's very tough for musicians. And it's really tough for people who book the engagements, because they're probably just stressed out all the time because they have people coming at them all the time. I want to play at your venue. I want to play at the club. But I've been to Europe many, many times. I'm going there next week, actually.
Oh,
I'll be
wow.
there playing my trio with the same personnel that's on the album, with Alan Nir, an Israeli bassist who also lives in New York, and a drummer from Warsaw, whose name is Lukas Zita.
Yeah,
Who's
it has
great.
beautiful interplay. Yeah.
He's great, and we're
Yeah.
going to be playing together for the 2 weeks, so that'll be cool.
Oh, fantastic. Where are you playing? In
We're
which countries?
in Munich, in London, in Uster, Switzerland,
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
Gallen. I'm doing a solo concert, and we're playing in Italy also, and it's on in Neuburg also at
Oh, yeah, Birdland. Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, that will be fun. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, I wanted to ask you, how did how did all those trios happen? You know, because when I look at the bass players, especially, I mean, Steve Davis is on drums, and then you have Jay Anderson and Drew Grass and John Patitucci and Scott Colley, like all the biggest monsters on the bass instrument, like, and George Mraz. I mean, later, like, how did all these connections happen?
Well, I knew these musicians from being in New York, and I just it was thrilled to play with them. They're all brilliant in their own way,
Yeah.
and brought something different to the music, and that's part of our evolution as musicians, is to play with different people, because different energies bring out different parts of our own playing,
Mhm.
and go in different directions. Playing with George Mraz is amazing. He's just so tuned. He was so tuned in to every note and every nuance, and they're all brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that project with Randy and George. It's it's so rare to hear you with a horn player. You
Mhm.
usually do trios. So like, how come? Why that decision actually? Why so much? Why haven't you done, like, a sextet, let's say, or maybe you have plans to do that, or
I might at some point, but I want to have a working trio. And it's
Okay.
funny how when you have a quartet, the the, the promoters want that quartet, but it's not always feasible to tour with a quartet.
Yeah.
And it's workable to tour with a trio. And it takes a lot to tour right now because airline prices,
Yeah,
everything.
it's crazy. Yeah.
And I loved doing the two quartet recordings. I did, and maybe I'll do some more in the future. But I feel like there's so much to continue to explore in the piano trio format. It's limitless, and I like the three-way conversation. It's big enough and small enough. It can be as big as an orchestra, and and it's like chamber music.
Mhm. Yeah. It's amazing. It keeps going on, the piano trio tradition. You go back and I don't know, Bill Evans and Keith Jarrett and all these monsters, and it's still evolving. That's so beautiful that there is so much space, throughout the decades, and the sound is evolving. Obviously, the composers are different, but it's nice. But yeah, I would
Yes.
love to hear you a quartet again, in a quartet or something. Hopefully, you'll
Well,
do it soon.
I hope I'll have many, many more records, albums in the future, and perhaps I'll do something with a horn player again,
Yeah,
or several.
would be amazing. Yeah. Lynne, I also wanted to ask you just your how did you end up with Larry Coryell on that record and playing with Larry?
He called me.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and Larry and we did some gigs together,
Oh,
I
really?
believe,
Oh,
and that was a very interesting combination, and it was a thrill to be on his recording. I don't do much work as a sideman, um, so that's always fun
yeah,
to
yeah,
try to bring someone else's music to light to
yeah,
life.
yeah. It's beautiful. That's such a nice record. I mean, I love Larry. Obviously, he was one of the founding fathers of fusion jazz guitar. Let's put it like that. So definitely. But
Yes.
what are your plans still for you're going to Europe now, and what are the future plans for the upcoming months, and for you to have some also gigs in New York, or?
I have some gigs in Minneapolis and Chicago and Indianapolis and Moline, and I'm trying to remember the rest in May. And then in June, I'm hoping to start writing music for a new album, which I hope to record here from this summer.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
That can't be right. That can't be right. No, it'd have to be 2 years, I hope. I'll figure it out, but I've got to start writing. I've written some things, but I don't like them, so I'm hoping that this is just the first phase.
Do you know where, I mean, what you're gonna explore, like, or kind of
No,
still searching?
no. The last few albums have had themes
Yeah,
dealing with social issues.
yeah,
Give Us These Days, which was my first album on Challenge Records,
yeah.
is about our mortality and about the preciousness of life. Chimes of Freedom is about the immigration crisis and the struggle to preserve democracy. And The Lights Are Always On was a tribute to our healthcare workers and also other heroes in our society who have gone above and just have put everything at risk to stand up for us and to stand up for freedom and so forth. And now this being human is really a more global, a larger view. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's next, but I like having a theme around the music. I think I'd like to tell a story and reach people that way as well, so that it's not just writing tunes, which is kind of what I used to do. I would hear a tune and then try to find a title, which is not always easy.
Yep.
Now, often I will find a title and then write the tune.
Yeah.
So that seems to be a little easier.
Yeah. That's a good way also. I mean, I always want to do these talks. I ask people how they compose, and many composers say like, okay, I have a title, purple, I don't know, whatever, and then you kind of get the idea where to go, and that's also a good way, actually. Yeah. So
It's
beautiful.
like, as opposed to having this wide open space of, okay, I have to write a song now. So what would the color red sound like?
Yeah.
Or in the case of this, what does passion sound like? What does courage sound like? What does love sound like? And then as a musician, as musicians, we hear ideas. The mind will produce something, and whether we like the first idea or the 20th is the one we want, it will produce things. And
Definitely.
as improvisers, we have those skills. We've developed those skills. And I think there's an element of trust that needs to come forth of this is part of the process, and hopefully one of these ideas will work and I can develop it into a composition.
Yeah, that's true. It's like if you say love, I don't hear an up tempo, at least me. I would probably go to the ballad. I mean, like, I think 90% of us would do that, or some not non-augmented.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said. What was that?
No, I said, like, if I would set like a title love, and I would probably write a ballad in like major chords or something, and nothing augmented. I don't know.
Sure.
It's a good way actually to do it. Yeah.
Yes, and there are no real rules. It could go in any direction. But I think that when we give ourselves even the loosest structure with writing, it can help with the process.
Yeah.
So we don't just feel like we're just out in the middle of the ocean. What do I do?
Yeah, it's true. And we need deadlines, at least I do. I'm like,
I'm sorry?
I'm saying we need deadlines, at least I do, like knowing that there's a recording in, I don't know, June,
Oh, yeah.
and then shit, I have to write 9 tunes until June. So that's like, okay, you get in the mindset and start writing. So that's important, I guess.
It makes a big difference. I've heard,
Yeah.
I think it might have been Hancock who, when he was asked what inspires him, and I think he may have said something like a deadline or a record date. So in other words, it's coming up a month from now and I need 8 tunes or 10 tunes. Okay, Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like 90% of musicians are like that. It's bizarre. Even though we're composers and it's there's life, and then you still have
Well,
to.
when we have.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But that focal point is definitely helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Lynn, I will not take more of your time. So, but thanks for sharing some of these thoughts, and really beautiful to hear you talk about your music and everything. So.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me to your beautiful show. And I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. And if